Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly through the moonlit corridors of ancient China, but we're not here to peek at warriors or spy on scholars. Nope, we're going straight for the hair. You stand in a wooden room lit by flickering oil lamps, the smell of warm sesame oil hanging in the air, and you can almost hear the swish of silk sleeves as someone prepares to twist a glossy black strand into something gravity-defying. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this night story with your modern shampoo routine intact, because what passed for conditioner back then might make you raise an eyebrow or two. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and the time you're watching down in the comments. I love seeing who's awake with me across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a narrow earthen path, past darkened courtyards, until you reach a courtyard house where a family is finishing their evening grooming ritual. In a world where hair is considered a gift from your parents, something you must never cut without a very good reason, this isn't just about looking pretty for the neighbors. It's a quiet act of respect, a daily performance of gratitude that ties you to generations before you. Confucius himself insisted that your body, hair included, should remain whole as you received it. It's a little heavy, sure, but it also means hair has meaning here that's hard to overstate. As you slip off your sandals and crouch in the corner like some time-traveling house guest, you notice a row of combs lying on the table, each carved from smooth bamboo. The mother dips one into a small pot of oil and begins combing her daughter's hair from root to tip. You catch the faint scent, sesame, walnut. It's nutty and comforting, like a late-night kitchen still warm from dinner. Mainstream historians agree these natural oils weren't just for show, they kept hair supple, helped with scalp health, and warded off dust in a world before daily showers. The father, meanwhile, is winding his own hair into a precise knot high on the crown of his head, tucking it under a simple cloth cap. It's practical, yes, but it's also ceremonial in its own way. He would never face the ancestors at the household shrine with his hair loose. Historians still argue whether this nightly tying and untying had deeper spiritual meaning, or if it was just a matter of neatness and lice prevention. Someone opens a wooden chest, and you glimpse a lacquered comb whose teeth gleam with an almost eerie shine. Here's your quirky fact for tonight: some combs were believed to have protective magic, driving away evil spirits that might sneak into the house while everyone slept. Imagine tucking yourself in at night knowing your hair comb is basically your guardian spirit. Outside, you hear the sound of a distant market shutting down, vendors calling out their last deals. The quiet returns, and you focus again on the rhythm of the comb moving through hair, steady, hypnotic, like the sound of waves on a slow night. You can almost feel yourself getting sleepy, lulled by the intimacy of this moment. You reach up to touch your own hair, imagining what it would be like to live in a world where every strand feels like part of your moral identity. Messy bun. Not happening. Bedhead. Forget it. And don't even think about grabbing scissors, there's no impulsive haircut after a bad breakup in this timeline. The stakes are higher. As the oil lamp flickers lower, the family finishes their grooming. The daughter's hair gleams like polished obsidian under the weak light, and you catch yourself smiling. There's something universal about this moment, even across 2,000 years. Hair, after all, is one of those tiny human constants. You share this instinct to smooth it down, to make yourself presentable before facing tomorrow. The father carefully covers the combs and pins with a cloth, keeping the tools safe for morning. He gives a final glance toward the ancestral tablets in the corner, bows slightly, and everyone shuffles off to sleep. You remain crouched there for a moment longer, listening to the night settle in around you. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere farther away, a string instrument twangs softly before going silent. You take a deep breath, letting the smell of oil and wood smoke sink into your senses. You rise, brushing the dust from your knees, ready to follow the next thread of this story. After all, now that you've seen how hair is cared for, the next step is to find out what tools and ingredients make these incredible styles possible. You slip quietly into another courtyard house just as dawn's pale light is spilling over the tiled rooftops. A rooster somewhere nearby does its best impression of a broken alarm clock, and you catch the faint clang of a well bucket being lowered for water. This house is quieter than the one from last night, but on the table sits a spread of tools that look less like bathroom accessories and more like a craftsman's kit. You edge closer, crouching low, and study the collection: combs of every size, wooden hairpins, bone needles, and a squat bronze pot still faintly warm from being heated over the hearth. It's easy to think of hair as just hair. But here, it's practically an art medium, and these are the brushes and chisels of the trade. One comb is wide-toothed, perfect for detangling after washing; another is so fine-toothed you're convinced it could catch a mosquito mid-flight. Historians agree that combing wasn't just cosmetic, it was considered healthful, stimulating circulation and keeping qi, the body's vital energy, in balance. You think about your own morning routine and wonder if running a plastic comb through your hair at top speed even counts. A young woman enters, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She unwraps it carefully to reveal a jar of fragrant paste, which she scoops with her fingers and rubs between her palms. The smell is sweet, herbal, probably a mix of sesame oil, cassia bark, and maybe even crushed flowers. This was the ancient equivalent of leave-in conditioner, and yes, it worked. It gave hair weight and gloss while keeping flyaways under control long before anyone invented hairspray. A quirky little tidbit: some recipes for hair treatments included animal fat mixed with soot to darken hair, or even melted peach gum to give it extra stiffness. You picture yourself trying to work peach gum through your hair today and immediately imagine a sticky disaster requiring industrial-strength shampoo to undo. But here, it was a practical solution. They needed hair to hold shape, especially for elaborate coils and buns that had to last an entire day. You pick up one of the bronze mirrors lying on the table. It's cool to the touch, polished so smooth you can see a slightly distorted version of your own face staring back. People used these mirrors to check symmetry after finishing a hairstyle, because, of course, symmetry was beauty. Historians still argue whether these mirrors were common household items or prized luxuries limited to wealthier families, but either way, they were essential to the hair game. A small boy shuffles in, rubbing his eyes, and plunks down on a low stool. His mother comes over with a damp cloth and starts wiping his scalp, muttering under her breath about dust and sweat. There's a bucket of warm water nearby, and you realize this is their version of a quick morning rinse. No hot shower with adjustable pressure, just a careful wipe down and maybe a splash of cool water over the head. Nearby, a rack holds thin sticks with little cloth pads at the end. At first, you think they're paintbrushes, but they're actually applicators for herbal dyes. When a family member started going gray earlier than they liked, they might brew up a batch of black walnut or indigo dye and brush it carefully through the strands. It's comforting to realize that vanity transcends centuries. People back then cared about covering grays just as much as we do now. Another tool catches your eye: a smooth, flat stone used to grind herbs into paste. This paste wasn't just for color, it could also work as a kind of natural shampoo. Powdered rice, crushed beans, and fragrant flowers mixed with water made a foamy cleanser that left hair clean and lightly scented. Sure, it probably didn't smell like Ocean Breeze or Vanilla Dream, but you get the sense it worked just fine. You pause and take it all in: the tools laid out like surgical instruments, the pots of oil, the jars of powder, the combs and pins and brushes. There's a certain reverence to how they're arranged, and it dawns on you that these items were more than personal hygiene tools, they were markers of civilization. In some periods, to be properly groomed was to be properly human, and messy hair could signal anything from mourning to rebellion. Outside, the light grows stronger, glinting off the lacquered handles of the combs. Someone picks up a pair of wooden hairpins, feels their weight, and sets them down again with care. You wonder how many generations have handled these same tools, how many styles they've created, and how many life events they've silently witnessed. And as you lean back against the wooden pillar, you realize the stage is set. The combs are ready, the oils are warm, and the morning routine is just beginning. Soon, these tools will turn ordinary loose hair into a living sculpture, and you're about to see how. The first rays of the sun slide over the eaves, and you find yourself sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, watching the day's real work begin. The air smells faintly smoky from the cooking fire, but here in the corner, it's all about hair. A young woman kneels beside a small basin of water, dipping her hands in and smoothing the surface of her hair until it clings damply to her scalp. There's something meditative about the way she does it, slow and deliberate, like she's preparing for a sacred ritual rather than just getting ready for breakfast. The basin water glints with an oily sheen, and you realize it's been mixed with fragrant herbs. This isn't just water, it's part of her daily hair cleansing routine. Historians agree that regular hair washing wasn't as frequent as our modern shower everyday habit, but when they did it, they made it count. Rice water, in particular, was prized for making hair silky and strong. Modern chemists have even found that rice water contains inositol, a compound that helps repair damage, so yes, ancient people were basically running a DIY hair spa thousands of years before TikTok caught on. She squeezes out the excess moisture and reaches for a small pot of perfumed oil. The smell is sweet and grassy, probably something like chrysanthemum or camellia oil. She warms it between her palms and smooths it through the lengths of her hair. You can almost feel it yourself, that heavy, nourishing glide from roots to tips. It's the kind of action that could put you to sleep if you weren't so fascinated. Her grandmother steps in and begins to comb the hair, each stroke long and steady. The sound is hypnotic, a soft rasp of wood against hair that fills the room like a whisper. In many households, this wasn't just practical grooming but a bonding ritual. Combing someone else's hair could be an act of affection or even a sign of care between generations. One old folk belief claimed that combing 100 strokes before bed would smooth away not just tangles but bad dreams, too. Then comes the fringe detail that makes you blink. For fragrance, some households tucked sachets of crushed flowers into their hair overnight so that the scent would release throughout the following day. Imagine waking up smelling like a bouquet before heading to work, kind of a built-in perfume diffuser. Historians still argue whether this was common or a luxury of the elite, since flowers weren't exactly cheap in every season, but the mental image is delightful either way. You watch as a younger boy is plunked down on a stool and handed a cloth. He wipes his scalp briskly with it, frowning at the cold water. A jar of powdered soap made from beans sits nearby. His mother mixes it with water until it forms a soft paste and rubs it gently over his head. A quick rinse later, and his hair looks darker, shinier, almost as though he's just had a modern salon treatment, minus the massage chair and trendy music. In the corner, someone is grinding dried herbs for another rinse mixture. You catch the smell of mugwort and realize this isn't just about looking good. These herbs were believed to keep the scalp healthy, fight dandruff, and even ward off bad luck. The mixture is carefully strained through cloth before being poured into a jar for later use. The room fills with that earthy, slightly spicy aroma, and you're reminded of how sensory haircare must have been in this time. No artificial scents, just plants, oils, and smoke. There's even a brazier nearby, and you watch as someone holds a strand of hair close to the smoke for a moment. Apparently, a brief exposure to aromatic smoke was said to keep away insects and leave a faintly pleasant smell. You're half tempted to try it yourself, though with modern fire alarms, that might end badly. By now, the young woman's hair is glistening and perfectly smooth. She braids it loosely just to keep it from tangling while she finishes morning chores. The braid swings softly against her back as she moves, and you catch yourself smiling. It's such a simple, universal gesture that you can picture doing it yourself on a lazy morning. As the household grows busier, the pace of grooming slows. The combs are wiped clean, the pots are capped, and the room smells like a mix of flowers, herbs, and faint smoke. You're left with the sense that these daily rituals weren't just practical, they were a kind of self-discipline, a way to prepare both mind and body for the day. You stretch your legs and rise, brushing bits of straw from your clothes. The family is ready to begin their day, their hair shining and fragrant, and so are you, because now that you've seen how they care for hair, it's time to see what they actually do with it. The styles themselves are next, and you can already feel the anticipation building. The sun is higher now, warming the tiled rooftops, and you follow the sound of chatter into a busier part of town. Here, the women are already at work turning clean, glossy hair into architectural wonders. You perch on the edge of a low stool, trying not to look too obvious, as one young woman sits patiently while her friend works on her hair with the precision of a sculptor. This is early imperial China, think Han Dynasty, and women's hairstyles are not something you improvise on the fly. The most common look you see here is the G, the classic top knot, though don't be fooled by the name, this is no lazy ponytail. The hair is gathered, twisted into a smooth rope, and then coiled high on the head before being pinned in place with a single, elegant hair stick. Historians agree this style wasn't just aesthetic, it was a symbol of adulthood and respectability. You wore your hair up when you came of age, and leaving it loose was reserved for children or certain ceremonies. The woman across from you is getting a slightly fancier version called the Gao Ji, where the knot is perched a little higher and maybe padded for volume. The effect is regal, almost like a crown made of her own hair. Her hairdresser tucks a delicate pin through it, securing the whole structure with a deft twist. You can almost hear the pin click into place, though it's wood, not metal. Your quirky tidbit of the moment. Some of these knots were so important that families kept little carved wooden frames to help shape them, like early-day hair molds. Imagine storing a literal head-shaped frame in the corner just to get your bun right. And yes, it worked, they used cloth padding and even waxed threads to help keep everything tidy. Down the street, you see another woman sporting a luo ji, a slightly looser coil that drapes toward the back of the head, letting a few strands fall elegantly over her neck. It's a softer look, less formal, the kind of thing you might wear to the market rather than a ceremony. Historians still argue whether these styles were strictly coded by social class or if everyday women had more freedom to improvise than we think. The evidence in tomb figurines shows everything from high, towering knots to simple buns, so the jury's still out. The air is warm, and you catch the smell of hot oil wafting from a nearby kitchen as you watch the final touches being added. A tiny sprig of flowers is tucked into one knot, maybe as a token of good fortune or just to look pretty. A dash of hair powder is brushed on, giving a soft matte finish that keeps flyaways under control. If you squint, it's almost like watching someone apply dry shampoo. You edge closer to another group, where a mother is styling her daughter's hair into twin buns on either side of her head. It's adorable, and you can't help but think of modern cartoon characters sporting the same look. The little girl fidgets, but once the hairpins are in, she grins proudly, knowing she looks just like her older sisters. A woman nearby is wearing a hairstyle so intricate you find yourself staring. Her hair is parted, braided, and then wound around a frame to create a shape that almost resembles a pair of wings. This might be for a festival or a special visit to the temple, but whatever the occasion, it's not something you could throw together in 5 minutes before heading out. As the morning continues, you notice how much teamwork these hairstyles require. Most women can't do this alone, they need sisters, mothers, or neighbors to help. Hair becomes a social event, a chance to share gossip and advice while shaping coils and knots. There's something comforting about that, the way a hairstyle becomes a moment of connection rather than just a chore. By the time everyone's done, the street feels transformed. The women carry themselves differently, heads held high, their silhouettes suddenly taller and more striking thanks to the verticality of their hair. You almost feel underdressed, wishing you had something more impressive going on with your own head right now. You step aside as the group heads off, some to the market, some to the shrine, some to whatever business fills their day. Their hair gleams in the sunlight, catching glints of reflected light from lacquered pins. You realize you've just witnessed not only fashion but a statement of identity, status, and pride. And now, you can't wait to see how these styles evolve when the Tang dynasty rolls in with its love for excess and drama. You blink, and suddenly the world around you has grown louder, brighter, and a little more glamorous. Welcome to the Tang dynasty, where subtle is not exactly the vibe. The street you're standing on bustles with merchants and scholars, their colorful robes swirling like ribbons, and above the chatter, you catch sight of hair that seems to defy both gravity and common sense. Gone are the simple, dignified knots of the Han, this is hair as theater, hair as status symbol, hair that might actually double as a hat rack if you're not careful. You edge closer to a group of women preparing for an outing. Their hair rises high above their heads, sculpted into dramatic shapes with the help of frames and padding hidden beneath. One style curves like a crescent moon, another fans out like a pair of wings, and yet another stacks loops upon loops until the whole thing looks like an edible pastry. Mainstream historians agree that Tang women embraced height and volume, turning hair into a statement piece that screamed confidence and prosperity. The Tang court was cosmopolitan, influenced by trade along the Silk Road, and you can see it in a variety of shapes, some even mimic Persian styles or Central Asian headdresses. The woman in front of you dips her fingers into a jar of beeswax and smooths it over the outer layer of her hair, locking stray strands into place. The shine is dazzling, catching the morning light like polished lacquer. You imagine walking around like that on a hot day and can't help thinking it must feel like wearing a helmet, but hey, fashion sometimes demands sacrifice. Here's your quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found evidence of hairpieces and extensions being used during this period, made from either human or animal hair. Yep, Tang women were basically running the first wig industry long before the 18th century French court made it a thing. And judging by the sheer size of some surviving clay figurines, they needed those hairpieces just to achieve the scale. Nearby, a maid carefully inserts long pins, some of them metal, some bone, through the hair structure, securing it like tent poles. It's almost an engineering marvel. One wrong move and the whole construction could tilt sideways, but somehow it holds. You half expect to hear someone yell, "Scaffolding secure." And if you think these styles were reserved for noble ladies, think again. Even middle-class women sometimes attempted more modest versions for festivals or special gatherings. Historians still argue whether this level of extravagance was encouraged by the court or was a form of friendly competition among women who wanted to outdo one another. Whatever the truth, you can't deny the effect. Everywhere you look, hair seems to be in full bloom. The colors aren't always natural, either. You spot one woman whose hair seems to have a reddish tint, likely from plant-based dye. Another has sprinkled her finished style with a fine white powder, giving it a soft, almost frosted look. Think early cosplay meets powdered wigs. The smell of flowers is strong here, too, since many women tucked fresh blossoms or silk replicas into their hair before heading out. A group of musicians passes by, their hair arranged in symmetrical arcs that bounce slightly with every step. It's theatrical but controlled, meant to draw the eye without distracting from the performance. You realize that in this era, hair isn't just a personal statement, it's part of the visual culture, something designed to impress not only your neighbors but anyone who might paint, carve, or write about you later. One woman steps away from the group and catches your eye. She tilts her head slightly, adjusting a dangling ornament shaped like a phoenix, and for a moment, you're struck by how much this hairstyle transforms her entire presence. She doesn't just look taller, she looks powerful, even a little untouchable. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the moment passes. The group continues on its way, leaving behind only the faint scent of oil and flowers. You're left standing in the street, half dizzy from the spectacle, and you can't help wondering how the next era, the Song dynasty, will react to this love of drama. Will they double down on volume, or pull everything back into something more subdued? The only way to find out is to keep walking. You leave behind the bustling Tang streets and find yourself in a quieter quarter where men gather in the shade of a mulberry tree. The mood here feels different, less flamboyant, more restrained, and as you take a closer look, it's obvious that men's hair carries its own set of rules, maybe even stricter than women's. Every head you see is carefully groomed, hair drawn up and tied in precise, disciplined ways. It hits you that for men in imperial China, hair was not just a personal choice but a public statement of morality. You notice a young scholar adjusting his guan, a simple cloth cap that sits over his topknot. He twists the knot a little tighter before slipping the cap back on, smoothing it down like someone making sure their tie is straight before an interview. Mainstream historians agree that men's hair was rarely cut during most dynasties, thanks to the Confucian principle that your body, hair included, is a gift from your parents. To cut it carelessly would be an insult. You can almost hear Confucius whispering in your ear, "Don't even think about that buzz cut." The men nearby all seem to sport variations of the topknot, but look closely and the differences start to appear. Officials wear theirs centered and perfectly coiled, tucked under formal caps. Farmers' knots are simpler, a little lower, more practical for working in the fields. And the soldiers you see passing on horseback. Their knots are tighter, secured with strips of leather so nothing comes loose mid-battle. There's an understated dignity to it all, like each man carries his status on the crown of his head. Here's a quirky fact: in some early periods, young men didn't tie their hair up until they reached adulthood in a special rite of passage called the Guan Li ceremony. Imagine waiting 15 to 20 years just to get permission to do your first real hairstyle. The moment the hair was tied up symbolized stepping into manhood, taking on adult responsibilities. No pressure, right? You overhear a conversation about a neighbor who had to cut his hair as punishment for a crime, an actual penalty used in some dynasties. It hits you how serious this was. Being forced to cut your hair wasn't just embarrassing, it marked you as shamed, almost like a walking billboard announcing your offense. Historians still argue whether this punishment was used consistently or mostly for dramatic effect in the historical records, but the idea alone is enough to make you sit up straighter. Nearby, a monk walks past, head completely shaved. It's such a striking contrast to the forest of topknots around you that you do a double take. His smooth scalp glints in the light, and you realize this is a different kind of statement altogether, a renunciation of worldly ties. While most men preserved their hair as a filial duty, monks shaved theirs as a sign of spiritual devotion. Two completely opposite approaches, both deeply meaningful. You watch as a group of young men practice tying and readying their knots, laughing and teasing each other when one of them can't get his to sit straight. It's oddly relatable, like modern teenagers struggling with their first attempts at tying a tie or styling their hair before prom. One of them uses a small stick to guide the coil, then secures it with a pin. When he finally gets it right, the others cheer as though he's just passed an exam. The street grows quieter as the men head off, to work, to study, to whatever duties fill their day, and you're left with the impression that men's hair is less about ornament and more about discipline. It's a kind of personal order, a way of aligning yourself with your community and its values. As you turn to go, you catch sight of a single warrior passing by, his knot undone, hair loose and flying behind him as he rides. There's something rebellious, almost cinematic about it. You can't help but wonder, is he just in a hurry, or is he making a statement? You smile to yourself, thinking that even back then, a little hair drama could turn heads. And with that thought, you head toward the sound of children laughing in the distance, because now that you've seen the adult rules, it's time to explore what hair meant for kids and teens coming of age. The laughter leads you to a courtyard bathed in late morning light, where children run in circles chasing a worn leather ball. Their hair is the first thing you notice, because unlike the disciplined topknots and elaborate coils you just saw, the kids' styles are playful, lopsided, and sometimes downright silly looking. You squat near the edge of the yard, watching as a toddler waddles past with his head completely shaved except for a single tuft of hair left at the crown. It's so tiny it looks like someone forgot to finish the job. This is no accident. In many parts of ancient China, babies had their heads shaved soon after birth, sometimes repeatedly during the first few years, partly for hygiene and partly because it was believed to keep them healthy. Mainstream historians agree this practice reduced lice and irritation, which makes sense in a world without modern shampoos. It also made it easier to see if a child had a fever, no hair hiding sweat or pallor. As the children grow older, their hair starts to signal more about their place in life. You see a little boy with two tufts tied into horns on either side of his head, making him look like a mischievous goat. A girl nearby has her hair divided into 4 little braids tied with bright red string, bouncing as she runs. These weren't just cute fashion choices, they were thought to ward off evil spirits or attract good luck. One quirky tidbit says some parents even shaped the tufts into symbols, like a peach for long life or a lotus for purity. Imagine being the toddler who had to sit still for that styling session. On the far side of the courtyard, a group of slightly older kids sits cross-legged while an elder carefully combs their hair and knots it at the crown. This is practice, because one day, they'll have to go through the formal coming-of-age ceremony, the Guan Li for boys and Ji Li for girls. Historians still argue exactly how widely these ceremonies were performed outside the aristocracy, but the symbolism is clear: tying the hair up was the moment you officially stepped into adulthood. One teenage boy stands nervously as his father demonstrates the tying ritual, twisting the hair into a small top knot and securing it with a strip of cloth. When the knot is finished, the father steps back with a proud smile. You can almost feel the gravity of the moment. This boy is now expected to behave like a man, to take on family duties, to marry when the time comes. And yes, you probably just felt your own teenage years flash before your eyes, minus the ceremonial hair tying part. A girl nearby is having her hair parted carefully down the middle, then arranged into a neat bun at the back of her head. It's not as tall or dramatic as the styles you saw earlier, but there's something elegant about its simplicity. Her friends giggle, clearly teasing her about looking grown up now, but you can tell she's proud. This is her first real adult hairstyle, a sign that she's ready to be considered a young woman. The courtyard is full of these small but meaningful transitions, loose hair turning into knotted hair, childish tufts giving way to braids, and braids eventually becoming the elaborate coils of adulthood. It's like watching the chapters of a life written in strands of hair. Suddenly, a toddler wails as someone tries to tie a tiny tuft too tightly, and the whole group bursts into laughter. Even the elder chuckles, loosening the knot and soothing the child with a pat on the head. It's a reminder that for all its symbolism, this is still just hair, something that grows back, something that gets messy, something that connects every generation through simple, daily care. As the children settle down for a midday meal, you take a last look at the scene, the shaved heads, the braids, the first top knots, and you realize how much these little details shape the rhythm of life. You step back into the lane, following the sound of a hammer striking metal in the distance. Someone's making hairpins, and that means it's time to talk about the ornaments that turned all these hairstyles into works of art. You follow the ringing sound of hammer on metal until you reach a small workshop tucked between two houses. Inside, a craftsman sits cross-legged at a low table, working with the kind of precision you'd expect from a jeweler. Spread out before him are thin rods of bronze, jade chips, and tiny strips of carved wood, each one destined to become part of someone's hairstyle. You crouch in the doorway, mesmerized, because this is where the real magic happens, where hair turns from a simple coil into a walking piece of art. The craftsman picks up a half-finished hairpin, called a zan, and carefully files its tip until it's smooth enough to glide through even the thickest bun. Mainstream historians agree that these pins were more than practical tools, they were status symbols. The material alone told you everything about the wearer. A plain wooden pin might be fine for daily chores, but polished bone, bronze, or gold meant you had money, and jade. That meant prestige on a whole new level. Your quirky fact for today: some pins were shaped into animals with meanings attached, phoenixes for virtue, butterflies for romance, lotus blossoms for purity. A woman wearing a pair of butterfly pins might not have needed to say much at all, her hair was already doing the flirting for her. And if she didn't want to flirt? Well, there were more solemn designs for that too, like cranes or simple geometric shapes that projected modesty. The craftsman sets aside the pin and picks up a comb made of ivory, running his thumb along the teeth to check its finish. Combs weren't just grooming tools, some were so beautifully carved they were reserved for special occasions, almost like jewelry. Historians still argue whether these ornate combs were meant to be shown off in public or kept tucked into the hair as a kind of private luxury. In the corner, you notice a tray of small metal flowers, each one painstakingly hammered into shape. These are hair ornaments known as buyao, literally, shake when you walk. They dangle from pins and sway with every step, catching the light and producing a faint jingling sound. You can't help but grin as you imagine walking through a quiet courtyard and accidentally announcing your presence with a chorus of tiny bells on your head. You slip outside and find a woman fitting a fresh set of ornaments into her hair. She slides a pin through her bun, then adds a buyao so that the little pendants dance just above her shoulder. When she turns her head, the whole ornament shimmers, reflecting sunlight like water rippling in a pond. The effect is so mesmerizing you almost forget to breathe. Nearby, a wealthier woman is being fitted with something far grander, a gold zan with inlaid turquoise and coral. Her maid adjusts it carefully, checking from every angle to make sure it sits perfectly symmetrical. This level of ornamentation isn't just fashion, it's practically a resume. One glance and you know her family is loaded. A young man passes by, his own hair secured with a simple wooden stick, and you realize ornaments weren't just for women. Men sometimes wore pins and caps with decorative touches, especially officials whose rank was displayed through the quality of their headgear. It's basically an early form of workplace dress code. Forget about ID badges, your hairpin said it all. Even children got in on the action. You spot a little girl with a small silver charm shaped like a gourd dangling from her braid. Someone nearby explains that the gourd is a charm to protect her from illness. Hair ornaments weren't just pretty, they were talismans, carrying wishes for health, luck, or a good marriage. As the sun climbs higher, the street glitters with moving jewelry, pins, combs, and pendants catching the light with every step. It's like a fashion show without a runway, every passerby contributing to a slow parade of sound and sparkle. You stand back and take it all in, realizing that hair wasn't just a canvas here, it was a gallery. Every pin, every comb, every swaying ornament told a story about who you were, what you hoped for, and even what you feared. And with that thought, you hear faint temple bells ringing in the distance, reminding you that some of the most important hair moments happened not in daily life but during rituals. Time to see how hair transformed for weddings, funerals, and everything in between. The bells guide you through a narrow alley until you emerge in a courtyard draped with red silk. The air is thick with incense, and you realize you've walked straight into a wedding preparation. Several women sit on low stools, their hair being worked into towering styles, each more elaborate than the last. You can feel the excitement buzzing in the air, a mixture of laughter, nervous whispers, and the occasional barked instruction from an older relative who clearly knows how things are supposed to be done. Front and center sits the bride, her hair already half finished. It's been parted, oiled, and pulled into two symmetrical sections, then coiled high and fastened with a combination of pins and silk cords. Mainstream historians agree that wedding hair was a serious affair, designed to take hours and sometimes requiring professional stylists, or at least a very patient aunt. The finished style had to last through ceremonies, banquets, and late-night games designed to test the bride's endurance. A maid steps forward carrying the piece de resistance, a bridal headdress with dangling tassels and shimmering metal ornaments. You hold your breath as it's lowered carefully over the bride's finished hair and secured with hidden pins. The result is breathtaking, the whole structure sways slightly with her movements, each motion producing a soft chiming sound. You can't help but think this is basically the red carpet moment of her life, and her hair just became the star of the show. Here's your quirky tidbit: in some regions, part of the wedding ritual involved the bride's mother combing her hair 3 times, each stroke accompanied by blessings for prosperity, health, and many sons. Talk about multitasking, combing and manifesting good fortune at the same time. Once the bride's hair is perfect, everyone exhales in relief, and the ceremony begins. But not all hair rituals are this joyful. Later, you find yourself walking through a quieter lane, where a family sits in mourning. The mood is heavy, the air still. One woman's hair hangs loose over her shoulders, uncombed, and you immediately know what it means: she's in deep grief. Historians still argue whether mourning hair customs were strictly codified across all regions, but loose hair often signified a break from normal social order, a way of physically showing sorrow. In some dynasties, mourners even cut their hair as a sign of grief, a dramatic act in a culture where cutting hair was taboo. Imagine the weight of that choice, each snip carrying symbolic pain. Others simply bound their hair with plain hemp cords, refusing to wear decorative pins until the mourning period ended. You turn a corner and spot a Buddhist monk with freshly shaved head performing a funeral chant. The sight reminds you that religious rituals also involved hair. Tonsure, or the shaving of the head, was a symbolic cutting away of worldly attachments. It's a stark contrast to the elaborate wedding styles, but in its own way, just as moving. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows as you pass another house where preparations for a coming-of-age ceremony are underway. A young girl kneels as her hair is carefully tied up for the first time in the Ji Li ritual. Her relatives watch solemnly, and you sense the moment's gravity. This is not just a hairstyle but a declaration that she is no longer a child. Ritual hair, you realize, is its own language. It marks beginnings, like weddings and adulthood, and it marks endings, like mourning and religious vows. It tells the world what stage of life you're in, what joys or sorrows you're carrying. And as you step out into the street again, the sound of laughter and crying blending faintly in the distance, you can't help but marvel at how much meaning can be packed into something as simple as a knot, a coil, or even a single loose strand. You walk on, following a road that curves toward the horizon, where people from other regions and cultures are gathering. Their hair looks different, their ornaments strange but beautiful. It's time to see how style changed across geography, and how the Silk Road braided more than just trade routes, it braided hair traditions too. You leave the courtyard behind and follow the road until it widens into a bustling market filled with travelers. Their clothes are dusty from the journey, but what really catches your eye is their hair, so different from the polished coils and pins you've been admiring. A merchant from the north sports a thick fur hat with braids spilling from beneath it, while a woman from the west wears her hair in loose waves, decorated with brightly colored beads that clink softly as she moves. Mainstream historians agree that the Silk Road didn't just move silk and spices, it also carried fashion and beauty trends from one end of Eurasia to the other. Hairstyles were no exception. As you weave through the crowd, you notice a Tangera lady trying on a new style she clearly picked up from a foreign trader, her hair piled high and fanned out, almost like a butterfly's wings. It's striking, and you can practically see her calculating how many admirers she'll collect at the next banquet. Your quirky tidbit here. Some Tang women reportedly used wigs or hairpieces imported from Central Asia to achieve these towering looks. That means ancient hair extensions were absolutely a thing, so next time someone says clip-ins are a modern invention, you can tell them they're about 1,300 years late to the party. Not everyone embraced foreign influence, though. You overhear two scholars debating whether these exotic styles corrupt traditional values or enrich them. Historians still argue whether foreign-inspired hair trends were a sign of cultural openness or evidence of shallow decadence. Proof, they say, that the Tang elite had too much free time and too much hair wax on their hands. Moving through the market, you see other fascinating contrasts: nomadic horsemen with practical, tightly bound braids designed to stay out of the way during long rides, traders with loose topknots dusted in perfumed powder, and even a musician whose hair is wrapped in a scarf patterned with motifs from far-off Persia. Each style tells a story of climate, occupation, and cultural exchange. A local hairdresser has set up shop right there in the market, taking advantage of the diversity of clients. You watch as she oils a customer's hair with fragrant sesame oil, then arranges it in a style halfway between Chinese and steppe traditions, a literal fusion look. It's not just pretty, it's political, signaling that this person can move between worlds, blending the grace of the city with the practicality of the frontier. Nearby, a group of foreign dancers performs, their hair braided with ribbons and tiny bells. When they spin, the bells ring in rhythm with the music, and the crowd cheers. You can't help but grin. This is basically a traveling TikTok trend, sweeping across the empire one city at a time. As the sun begins to set, you notice a quiet scholar sketching these styles in a notebook. Maybe one day someone will use these sketches to reconstruct what you're seeing right now. Maybe centuries from now, people will still be debating whether this or that hairstyle was authentically Chinese or simply borrowed. You take one last look at the market before stepping onto a quieter path, where a group of officials waits outside a government hall. Their hair is severe, perfectly knotted, each style regulated by rank and duty. It's time to see what happens when hairstyles stop being just personal choices and become official business, where even a stray hair could be a political statement. You step onto the quieter path and find yourself staring at a row of officials standing perfectly still, their hair immaculately tied and topped with stiff black hats. The mood shifts immediately, gone are the jingling ornaments and laughing merchants. Here, every strand of hair feels like it has been inspected for discipline. You almost want to check your own reflection to make sure you don't look sloppy by comparison. Mainstream historians agree that in many dynasties, hair was literally a matter of law. Men were expected to grow their hair long as a sign of filial piety. After all, the body was a gift from one's parents, and cutting it was seen as disrespectful. This belief made hairstyles not just fashion choices but moral declarations. That explains why these officials' hair is slicked, parted, and tied into near-perfect top knots, then tucked into official headgear called guan or jean. One quirky tidbit jumps out at you when you notice that some officials' hats have long, wing-like extensions jutting out on either side. A bystander whispers that these are meant to keep them from leaning too close to whisper secrets during court sessions. It's a little like putting blinders on a horse, but for gossip prevention. Inside the hall, you watch an official bow deeply to the emperor, the ribbon on his headpiece swaying slightly but never coming loose. Historians still argue exactly how much freedom these men had in styling their hair beyond the basic knot, but one thing's certain, messing it up was risky. Appear sloppy at court and you could be reprimanded, demoted, or worse, publicly humiliated. Your eyes wander to a guard standing at the edge of the hall. His hair is knotted too, but more practically, with less ceremony. Military men had to keep their hair secure in battle, often tying it under helmets or wrapping it with cloth. Some even shaved part of their heads to make helmet wearing more comfortable, though this was controversial and sometimes outright banned by moralists. As you leave the hall, you spot a scholar official removing his hat outside and carefully readying his topknot. It's almost meditative, each motion precise, each pull of the cord just tight enough. You imagine this ritual happening every morning, like putting on a tie before work but with way more philosophical weight behind it. On your way out, you overhear two younger clerks arguing about whether they should adopt a slightly looser knot style that has become trendy in the capital. One claims it shows poetic temperament, while the other insists it looks lazy. You smirk. Office fashion debates have clearly been happening for a very, very long time. As you leave the official district, the noise of daily life grows louder again, vendors shouting, children playing, musicians performing. But the image of those perfect top knots sticks with you. They're more than just hair, they're symbols of order, hierarchy, and respect. The sun is dipping low now, casting everything in gold. You follow the sound of wooden instruments and find yourself near a troupe of dancers preparing for a festival performance. Their hair glimmers with ribbons and feathers under the setting sun, promising a show worth staying for. Time to see how hairstyles turned into art forms on stage, exaggerated for drama and storytelling. You linger near the festival grounds, drawn by the rhythm of drums and the lilting notes of flutes. A group of dancers is gathered just beyond a silk curtain, getting ready to perform. Their hair is an absolute spectacle, towering constructions of coils, braids, and hairpieces that seem to defy gravity. You step closer, fascinated, because this isn't everyday fashion anymore. This is hair turned into theater. Mainstream historians agree that during dynasties like the Tang, stage performance and court entertainment pushed hairstyles to their most extravagant limits. Dancers often wore their hair in tall, fan-shaped styles called panji, which could be further embellished with flowers, ribbons, and even feathered headdresses. Some styles were so tall they had to be anchored with hidden wires or extra hairpieces, ancient equivalents of hairspray and bobby pins. Your quirky tidbit? Records mention that some performers used animal fat mixed with beeswax to keep their styles in place under hot stage lights. That's dedication. Imagine rehearsing a full dance routine with your head smelling faintly like a candle shop. As the performance begins, the dancers glide onto the stage, and you watch as their hair ornaments catch the lantern light, sparkling with each movement. One dancer spins, and her hair seems to fan out in a perfect circle, the ribbons trailing like shooting stars. It's mesmerizing, so much so that you almost forget the choreography is centuries old, meant to impress emperors and foreign ambassadors alike. Historians still argue whether these exaggerated hairstyles were faithfully copied by women outside the palace or if they stayed mostly within elite entertainment circles. But as you watch a group of children on the sidelines mimicking the dancers with their own messy topknots, you suspect the trend leaked out into daily life more often than scholars give it credit for. Beyond the stage, you notice musicians tuning their instruments, their hair tied back simply but neatly. Even they take care to look presentable, because performance was not just about sound but about spectacle. The whole event is a carefully choreographed display, and hair is as important as costumes and props. Later, you see actors from an early form of Chinese opera preparing backstage. Their hair is painted blacker than black with soot paste, then slicked and shaped into dramatic silhouettes that match the characters they play, heroes with upright knots, villains with wild, uncombed strands. The hair itself becomes part of the storytelling, telling the audience who to cheer for and who to boo before a single line is spoken. When the performance ends, the crowd erupts in applause, and the dancers bow deeply. You catch a glimpse of one performer laughing as she tugs at her hairpiece, clearly relieved to take it off. Underneath, her real hair is damp with sweat, sticking to her forehead in messy curls. For all the elegance and artifice, these performers are human too, and their hair, no matter how grand, always comes down at the end of the night. As the festival winds down, lanterns are lit, turning the square into a warm ocean of flickering light. You sit on a stone bench for a moment, thinking about how performance hairstyles were designed to be bigger than life, a kind of dream you could step into for a night. But beyond the festival, the real world keeps turning, and the years keep passing. You rise and continue walking, feeling time speed up around you. Hairstyles will keep changing with every dynasty, every cultural wave, every technological breakthrough. Soon you'll see how later periods took all this artistry and either simplified it, or cranked it up to 11. You keep walking, and the air feels as though it's thick with centuries. The lively festival fades into memory, and before long you're standing in a different era entirely. The architecture looks a little sharper, the fashions a little more restrained. You've arrived in the Song dynasty, where hairstyles take a turn toward refinement and quiet elegance. Women pass you wearing sleek buns at the nape of the neck, fastened with delicate pins that barely peek out from the coils. Mainstream historians agree that Song-era styles were a reaction against the flamboyant heights of the Tang, less about towering displays and more about graceful proportion. It's like everyone collectively decided, okay, we've proven we can make our hair defy gravity, now let's chill out a little. Your quirky tidbit here. Some Song ladies reportedly used hair washing powders made of ground beans, herbs, and even perfumed flower petals. The result was fragrant hair that stayed smooth without the heavy oils of earlier periods. It sounds fancy until you imagine accidentally inhaling bean dust mid-bath. But just when you think things are getting understated, time spins forward again, and you're staring at the ornate ceremonial hair of the Ming dynasty. Buns get wider, side loops appear, and some styles even incorporate false hair to create impressive volume. Historians still argue whether the famous cloud bun styles were daily wear or reserved for big events, but you can tell by looking at them that these were not slap it together in 5 minutes hairstyles. You watch as a Ming bride has her hair parted into symmetrical wings, then secured with a crown-like headdress covered in kingfisher feathers. The feathers shimmer an electric blue, almost glowing in the light. It's so dazzling that you find yourself wondering how many birds it took to make this one piece. Time rushes forward again into the Qing dynasty, and suddenly everything changes. The Manchu rulers introduced the queue, a style that required shaving the front of the head and braiding the remaining hair down the back. For men, this was non-negotiable, refusing to adopt the queue could get you executed. The political weight of this hairstyle hits you hard. It's not just a fashion statement, it's a survival strategy. You see a man standing still as another shaves his forehead with a straight razor, the braid at the back swinging with each motion. He doesn't flinch, but you sense his unease. For some, wearing the queue meant betraying Han traditions, for others, it was simply what had to be done to live another day. Meanwhile, Manchu women wear their own distinctive style called liangbatu, a flat, winged headdress that makes them look taller and more regal. It's striking, but you can tell it must be heavy. A young girl fidgets under the weight of hers until her mother gives her a sharp look, and she quickly stands up straighter. As you watch, you realize you've just traveled through hundreds of years in a matter of moments, watching hair expand, contract, and transform to match the shifting tides of politics, fashion, and philosophy. Each dynasty wrote its story in knots and braids, in feathers and jade, in shaved foreheads and cloud buns. The night is fully settled now, stars pricking the dark sky overhead. You sense that you're nearing the end of your journey, but not quite yet. There's one more stop, the modern age, where ancient styles echo faintly in salons, museums, and fashion shows. Time to see what survived, what was reinvented, and what still whispers through the strands of hair worn today. You take a step, and the centuries catch up to you all at once. The tiled streets and paper lanterns dissolve into the buzz of scooters and the glow of LED signs. You're in modern China now, standing outside a hair salon with glass doors and bright lights. Inside, a stylist in a sleek black apron is sectioning a client's hair with plastic clips, and for a moment you almost miss the clatter of bronze pins and wooden combs. But look closer, the echoes are still there. Mainstream historians point out that modern Chinese hairstyles occasionally revive ancient forms. A bride today might wear a qipao and choose a coiled chignon pinned with gold flowers, a direct descendant of the buns you saw centuries ago. On social media, influencers sometimes recreate elaborate Tang Dynasty styles for fun, complete with buyao ornaments that jingle softly in short videos. You smile, realizing that ancient hair trends are basically going viral again. Your quirky tidbit for this section: some modern salons actually offer historical hairstyle experiences, where you can sit down and have your hair arranged exactly as a Han noblewoman or a Ming empress might have worn it. It's half fashion, half time machine, though you probably won't be sitting still for hours like the original wearers did. Meanwhile, you spot a teenager walking by with neon streaks in her hair, the exact opposite of courtly tradition, and yet somehow still connected. After all, whether it's braids or dye jobs, hair has always been about telling the world who you are. Historians still argue how much modern Chinese identity consciously draws from ancient heritage versus global trends, but it's clear that people are still playing with the same palette, just with new tools. You wander into a museum and find yourself staring at a glass case full of ancient hairpins, their gold and jade still gleaming despite the passage of time. A label explains that some of these pins were buried with their owners, treasured enough to follow them into the afterlife. It hits you just how intimate hair is, something that grows from you, that you style daily, that can be dressed up for love, cut for grief, or hidden for faith. Outside, night markets buzz with life. You see street performers with flashy hairstyles that look like modern cousins of the festival dancers you saw earlier, their hair dyed in rainbow colors and spiked dramatically. Couples stroll by, their hair casually tied back, but you can spot tiny nods to tradition, jade hair clips sold at souvenir stands, embroidered ribbons tied to ponytails, old styles remixed into new ones. You pause on a bridge overlooking the city, watching neon lights ripple across the river. The reflection reminds you of the shimmering hair ornaments from centuries past, glinting in torchlight. Hair, you realize, has always been a mirror of its time, whether it's coiled high to impress an emperor or worn loose to protest, whether shaved for vows or dyed electric blue for self-expression. The city hums around you, a mixture of old and new, and you sense that this is where the story has been heading all along, a reminder that the past is never really gone. It's just braided invisibly into the present, waiting for someone, maybe you, to notice. But your journey isn't quite over. There's still one last chapter to settle everything down, to let the echoes fade and leave you with a soft, steady picture of what you've seen tonight. You turn away from the city lights and follow a quiet path toward that final, peaceful destination. The noise of the city fades behind you as the path leads into a quiet garden. Lanterns line the walkway, their light soft and warm, like fireflies guiding you toward the end of your journey. A stone bench waits near a small pond, and you sit, letting the silence settle over you. In the still water, you see reflections, not just of yourself, but of every hairstyle you've seen tonight. The towering tang buns, the braided queues, the simple song knots, they all ripple across the surface like ghosts of the past. Mainstream historians agree that hairstyles carry layers of meaning, but sitting here, you feel those meanings rather than just know them. Each style you witnessed was a signpost of its time, devotion to parents, a declaration of adulthood, an act of mourning, or an expression of rebellion. You think back to the Manchu queue and how refusing to wear it could be a death sentence. Hair can be just decoration, yes, but sometimes it's also destiny. Here's your quirky final tidbit: there are recorded cases of people keeping locks of a loved one's hair as a keepsake or even weaving it into jewelry. It's a little eerie, but also touching, proof that hair has always been more than something to wash and cut. It's memory itself, something that stays behind when everything else is gone. Historians still argue over which dynasty produced the most beautiful hairstyles, but sitting here, you suspect that's missing the point. Each era's hair was beautiful in its own way, carrying the weight of its people's hopes, fears, and daily routines. You close your eyes, hearing once again the jingling of buyao, the swish of combs, the distant laughter of children with little horn-shaped tufts on their heads. And just like that, the centuries melt away, leaving you back in the quiet night of your own world. Your breathing slows, and so does the narration. The garden seems to grow softer around you, every edge blurring, every sound fading to a gentle hush. The pond becomes still, perfectly still, reflecting only the faint glow of the lanterns overhead. You imagine the last hairpin being set carefully on a dressing table, the last ribbon being untied. All the styles, all the knots, all the careful arrangements dissolve into loose, flowing strands, as if history itself is letting its hair down at last. The air is cool, almost weightless, and you feel yourself sinking into that same calm, as if your body has been uncoiled like a braid, strand by strand, until nothing is tense anymore. The echoes of markets, weddings, festivals, and courtrooms become soft murmurs, then whispers, then nothing at all. And as you lie back in this imagined garden, your head supported by invisible hands, it feels safe to rest. The world is quiet, the night is gentle, and your journey, through centuries of style, through love and loss and laughter, has been braided into something whole. So let your own hair fall loose, let your thoughts drift like lanterns down a slow river, and let the dark carry you toward sleep. The garden is quiet now, softer than a whisper, as if the world itself has decided it's time to rest. The lantern light seems to stretch and slow, casting long, calm reflections across the surface of the pond. Each ripple fades gently, like a memory smoothing itself out until nothing remains but stillness. You let your shoulders sink a little lower, feeling the day, or maybe the centuries, slip away from you. Your breathing slows to match the easy rhythm of cricket somewhere in the distance. The air is cool but not cold, like someone left the night just slightly open to keep you comfortable. Every hairstyle, every clink of a hairpin, every sound of laughter you've heard tonight folds itself away like carefully kept silk. The market noise, the wedding bells, the stage drums, all of them are faint now, as if heard from the far end of a long hallway. You imagine your own hair, whatever style it's in, loosening a little, the weight of it falling free, strand by strand. The feeling is so relaxing it's almost hypnotic, and you let it keep happening until you're floating somewhere between memory and dream. There's nothing left to do now but rest. The story is told, the pins are put away, and the night is waiting to carry you gently to sleep.